Hi, my name is Jana de Gregoris, and today I will be discussing the radiation accident that took place in Goiânia, Brazil. I will discuss purpose and objectives, outlining the context of the situation, followed by context of radiation pollution. We'll go over initial assessment, monitoring. I'll discuss acute radiation syndrome, as well as geographic location of this incident. Goiânia is the second most populous city in the Central West region, only surpassed by the country's capital, Brasilia. It is an important economic hub of the region, center of industry, medicine, and agriculture. The Goiânia accident took place in 1987 in a private radiotherapy institute that moved to new premises, leaving a teletherapy unit in the old building, which was partly demolished without notifying the licensing authority as required by law. On September 13, 1987, two people entered, found some scrap value, removed the radiation head, took it home, and partly dismantled the equipment. This caused external gamma radiation with localized burns to their bodies. One of them had their arm amputated eventually. The equipment was sold to a junkyard. Sores ruptured, resulting in environmental contamination, as well as external and internal exposure of many people. The remnants of the unit were sold to a second junkyard, causing further exposure of many people. This proceeded for 5 days. People were demonstrating gastrointestinal symptoms arising from their exposure to radiation. The symptoms were initially not recognized as being caused by ionizing radiation. However, on September 28, one of the victims, wife of first junkyard owner, connected the illness with the source and took part of it to the public health department using a public bus. She had an estimated whole body dose of 5.7 gray. She died on October 23rd at 38 years old. Several city blocks had to be demolished due to this accident. Time magazine has identified the accident as one of the world's worst nuclear disasters, and the International Atomic Agency called it one of the world's worst radiological incidents. The cesium-137 based teletherapy unit was a small capsule containing about 93 grams of highly radioactive cesium chloride, encased in a shielding canister made of lead and steel. While the serial number of the device was unknown, thus hindering definitive identification, the device was thought to have been made in the US at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in about 1970. The activity of the source was 74 terabecquerels in 1971. The International Atomic Energy Agency describes the container as an international standard capsule. It was 51 millimeters or 2 inches in diameter and 48 millimeters or 1.8 inches long. The specific activity of the active solid was about 814 terabecquerels per kilogram of cesium-137, half-life of 30 years. The dose rate at 1 meter from the source was 4.56 grays per hour. The International Atomic Energy Agency states that the source contained 50.9 terabecquerels when it was taken, and that about 44 terabecquerels of contamination had been recovered during the cleanup operation. This means that 7 terabecquerels remained in the environment. It would have decayed to about 3.5 terabecquerels by 2016. On September 28th, a local physicist was the first to assess the source. He initiated the evacuation of the area and informed the authorities. The speed and the scale of the response were impressive. Population was instructed to go to the triage center, which was at the local Olympic soccer stadium. About 112,000 people were examined for radioactive contamination, and 249 of them were found to have been contaminated. Supposed contaminated victims were isolated. More severely irradiated patients, 49 of them, were transferred to Marcílio Dias Naval Hospital in Rio de Janeiro. 46 people underwent decorporation therapy in order to enhance the elimination of radionuclides, and 4 cases resulted in death. This graph demonstrates the details of the individual dose estimates for 24 subjects whose radiation dose exceeded 0.5 gray. Among those, 16 individuals exceeded 1.0 gray and 5 exceeded 3 gray. None of the estimates exceeded 6 gray. Acute radiation syndrome, also known as radiation poisoning or radiation toxicity, is a constellation of health effects presenting within 24 hours of exposure to high amounts of ionizing radiation. They may last for several months. The terms refer to acute medical problems rather than ones that develop over a prolonged period of time. The onset and type of symptoms depends on the radiation exposure. Relatively smaller doses result in gastrointestinal effects such as nausea and vomiting, and symptoms related to falling blood count such as infection and bleeding. Relatively larger doses can result in neurological effects and rapid death. Treatment of acute radiation syndrome is generally supportive with blood transfusions and antibiotics. This map demonstrates the location of the Goiânia radiation accident and its proximity to the country's capital city of Brasília, as well as the distance to the Marcílio Dias Naval Hospital in Rio de Janeiro. The cleanup operation following Goiânia radiation accident was much harder than it could have been because the source was opened and the active material was water soluble. Topsoil had to be removed from several sites, and several city blocks were demolished. The Goiânia accident produced 3,800 metal drums, 1,400 metal boxes, 10 shipping containers, and 6 sets of concrete packaging of waste. It took 275 trucks loads to remove. The original teletherapy capsule was seized by the Brazilian military upon its discovery, and since then the empty capsule has been on display at the School of Specialized Instruction in Rio de Janeiro as a memento to those who participated in the cleanup of the contaminated area. In conclusion, radioactive source taken out of the regulatory system can present a serious hazard. Educating the general public of the potential danger of radioactive material is an important factor in decreasing the likelihood of radiological accident. The cleanup operation following the Goiânia accident was much harder than it could have been because the source was opened and the active material was water soluble. Topsoil had to be removed from several sites, and several city blocks were demolished. It's very important to remember that radioactive sources taken out of the regulatory system can present a serious hazard. Educating the general public of the potential danger of radioactive material is an important factor in decreasing the likelihood of a radiological accident.